There you go. It just unmuted. Touch button wasn't working.
All right. Call to order the March 28th Oregon City Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee meeting. Starting off with introductions, to my right, Mr. Daniels.
Bill Daniels.
Derek Kugel.
Chris Cook.
Karen Murray.
Lisa Novak.
Doug Neely.
Alicia Hammock.
Jeff Sargent.
Phil Lewis.
I'd like to take a real brief moment and welcome all of our new members.
Yes.
So welcome. Glad to have you here. Has everyone had an opportunity to review
You want to let me do the
Oh, yes, go ahead.
interruption of flow here because we have new members. I'm going to do a little quick overview on how we use the monitors. Is everyone signed in? And if you look,
You just go ahead and push it and sign in. Yep.
here we go. If you click on agenda at the bottom, your agenda will come up. So our next item is approval of minutes. If you click on that, you'll notice on the bottom right of the screen, it says request to speak. If during the item on the agenda, you have something to say, if you would click that button, those will come up on Lisa's screen in order so that she can call on people. It's a little more orderly way to conduct conversation. And you do need to be on the main agenda item in order to click that. You also have the option to decide you don't have anything to say and retract that request. If you also notice under approval of minutes, there is a paper with a little paper clip on it. If you click on that, on the bottom right of your screen, you see documents. That will actually let you open the document on your screen if you carried too many papers with you or didn't bring them with you. And then again, you'll need to go back to the agenda item.
Yours is blue, mine is gray.
If you're interested in speaking, go back to the actual agenda item. Main thing it takes is as you go through the agenda, you need to kind of click through on where we are. And for those of us, I think actually everybody except for Bill, who has your back to this wall, there's a little toggle switch down here that says presentation and packet. If there's actually a presentation, the screen will come down. Bill supposedly can see it. But the rest of us, you're going to need to click the toggle switch to change over to presentation in order to actually see that on your screen. You do not need to crane your neck. The only disadvantage is if the speaker has one of those wonderful little laser pointers, you can't see it. So you may crane your neck occasionally, but hey. So that's the ease of life with this wonderful system.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate it. Okay, and down on the bottom center of your screen, clicking on agenda with the paper clip, I should backtrack. Active items with the paper clip, we're going to be reviewing the PAC minutes from last month. And has everyone had an opportunity to review those minutes? Are there any questions or comments?
I move to approve.
Do we have a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Anybody present like the Senate? Me.
Very good. Okay, moving on to item 4 on our agenda. Citizen comments on issues and items not on the agenda. Do we have any comments this evening? Okay. All right, thank you. Moving on to item 5, presentations. Presentation, Natural Resource Committee, Mr. Doug Neely.
Thank you. Not all presentations are going to come on your screen, and this one won't. But I asked for the Natural Resource Committee to perhaps give an overview of some of the items that are on there that I think there'll be mutual interest in the this advisory committee and activities that we're doing. I'm Doug Neely. I'm the chair of the Natural Resource Committee. For several years, we've had, one of the items is, well, for several years, we've had a heritage tree program where people can nominate trees that are of a certain size and presumably of a certain age that can be named as heritage trees. If it's on a private property and they're named, then they are actually go onto the title of the property. So if it's sold, the heritage tree designation remains. Several years ago, I actually nominated, I think the second tree when I lived in a house that was essentially a heritage house in the old neighborhood, and it only cost $25. The code has been revised to require the evaluation of a heritage tree to be done by an arborist. This can cost up to $300. Our heritage tree program has not been very successful. I think we've only had about five that have been nominated and approved. We don't know to what extent that might be because of the cost associated with it. So we discussed that, and we don't really understand the purpose of bringing an arborist, of course, is to see if the tree is diseased or is a danger. There is no penalty for cutting down a heritage tree that is diseased or it poses a danger. And so we felt that requirement for an arborist is really not necessary. A person's not going to name a tree that they think is either dangerous to them or is a diseased tree. And they'll probably have some kind of surface evaluation to do that. So one of our members, Nancy Brocha, is looking at the ordinance as it exists and has presented an edited version of it. I will say that the planning department, which we're under incidentally, the planning department seems to be quite receptive to making that change, but it'll have to go through a process, probably go through the planning commission and definitely have to go to the city commission before that code is revised. Another area of concern, let me back up on this one. I believe it was about 1997 or so, the Metro Regional Government had established setbacks along streams that would apply region-wide. Oregon City modified it, and any anadromous streams that were there, we actually put into our code a 200-foot setback from those streams. Now this one applies only to developed land. So if a person's going to come in and develop it, then at that point that particular boundary would apply. If the land is already developed or it had been developed and it's going to be redeveloped for some reason, that particular code doesn't apply and it just goes down to the 50-foot piece that Metro had. In 1997, the Planning Commission at the Cove reduced the 200-foot buffer where the development is going to occur to 50 feet. The agreement had not been finalized for the Cove development at that time. That was several years ago. I believe it was 2008 this happened. And it's a type 3, which means it doesn't automatically go to the City Commission or Urban Renewal Committee. At that time, I was serving on both, and I was really surprised when we found out late last year that this change had been made. We're not terribly concerned about it as applies to the Cove development because they have come before our committee and we've recommended that they're going to have to do cut and fill, balance cut and fill because it's in the floodplain and you cannot change the overall flood capacity within the floodplain. So they have structures that they're building that are currently in the floodplain and they'll have to do some cutting in the floodplain to do that, and that's probably going to come around the banks of the Cove, and we understand that. When we found out about this, we did discuss this with the developer and talked also to the Urban Renewal Agency when there was public input for that. And they have agreed to do native plantings all the way up through the Esplanade, which is actually more than 200 feet. So that wasn't an issue to us, but the existence of the code language was. And so we're hoping to have a couple things happen, either when any issue comes before the Planning Commission that involves the vegetative barrier along a waterway, that it come to us first. That's one possibility, and then we can give our advice to the Planning Commission. Just like the Parks and Recreation Committee, the Natural Resource Committee is just purely advisory, whereas the Planning Commission is actually a governing body. And the type 3 decision that was made does not go to the City Commission unless it's appealed to the City Commission or the City Commission wants to call it out in some form. Another alternative would be to change the code so that it becomes a type 4 decision, which has to go through the Planning Commission and the City Commission, or to get more of a public output. I will say the developer of the cove has been very cooperative with us, and we're really pleased with their decision to do those native plantings. A couple members of our committee would like to make some landscaping advice, and I have suggested that that be done directly with the developer as opposed to going to the Urban Renewal Agency, because they have already bought that piece of property, and what would apply, the codes that would apply, would not necessarily cover the kind of landscaping that was presented. And we don't really want to get in a adversarial role with the developer because they've been very, very easy to work with. And so we feel that's going to be better done through private communication. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we're involved in some of the parks, specifically Waterboard Park. Several of our members are involved in that particular project, and we're interested, of course, in whatever happens, particularly in the open space parks of our interest. Now, I should come back to the heritage tree situation. The planning director has allocated $300 for an arborist that we would be able to allocate out of our committee. I don't know how long our code change, should it occur, would take place, but we are considering to nominate trees ourselves that are either within the public right-of-way or are in parks themselves. And of course, in their parks, I'll be presenting that to you all as well. So, and our hope is that we can have those up for nomination and bring in an arborist with the $300 and be able to perhaps have as many as 3 trees done because they're all be in Oregon City, and probably could do it in the same day. That's a hope. We don't know what that's going to be. Anyway, we're interested in working any projects that are natural resource issues, which of course Waterboard Park is, that are of interest to you, and work with you on those projects. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
As you're probably aware, we have one heritage grove of trees as well in Waterboard Park.
Yes, that's true. I will tell you that we've looked at the minutes, and that decision must have been made to the Natural Resource Committee. Had it come to us, we would have approved it, but that decision must have been at a different level. Jerry Herman has been a member of that Natural Resource Committee from the beginning. It existed, then it didn't exist, and it existed then again, and he does not recall that particular item coming before the Natural Resource Committee.
It was nominated by the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, probably just shortly after we had adopted the Heritage Tree Program to include Heritage Grove and the $300 arborist fee. But I remember that it's on public land, so it was up to the city to be approved, and I don't know if it was at commission level. I'm not sure of that, but it is Heritage Grove.
Could have been the Planning Commission level. And incidentally, they don't have to come through us. I should mention that. Our concern is with the code language. So when it was mentioned that was a Heritage Grove, we were pleased about that, but we weren't aware that that was the case. Yes, sir.
Has there ever been a citywide survey for what might be the oldest trees in the cities, or I mean, have we ever taken a look to see what,
To the best of my knowledge, no.
no, okay.
I have a statement and a question. Park Place. So we have some trees there. So Dee Dee has been working on that. And would there be any opportunity for the arborist to visit those trees?
I think, as we say, on parks and so forth, that's probably one tree that we'd be considering seriously.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, question would be, what about trees located in the natural resource overlay?
Normally, they wouldn't be taken down.
Ah,
If there's a reason to do so, they would have to be mitigated for.
okay,
But normally, they would not be taken down.
okay. Yeah, curious about that. Okay.
I was wondering about, have we, or you guys, or folks, regarding the Beaver Creek Renewal Project, I was just wondering if there's any trees that would qualify as heritage program on that side of the road that, with that coming up.
It's possible. Here's in a school setting session last year, both the Planning Commission and the Natural Resource Committee came forward with developing some kind of code restricting tree cutting for so many years before an annexation occurs. That's not currently in our code. And so there's no automatic protection to any development at this time going in and cutting down the trees and then annexing in right after they cut the trees down. So there's no protection there.
Because that's what they're doing.
Yeah. And that's a concern that both the Planning Commission, the City, and the Natural Resource Committee presented to the to the City Commission a year ago. And we've restated it this last year.
So just a statement or a question back to Park Place. I'm not sure where you're referring to in Park Place.
There's a back area on the east side of Park Place, playground, the playground equipment.
Okay.
If you continue up the hill, there's a line of trees. Most of them are, not hazelwood, not hickory, there's another word, and I can't think of, it's not coming to me right now, hawthorn. Most of them are hawthorn trees. But there is a grove of Oregon oak trees. And there's one in particular that's actually two trees combined. And what's kind of neat, there's a heart shape. Yeah, I have a photo. It's kind of neat. And that's the one that stands alone in the field area.
Where my brain was going when you mentioned Park Place was the newly annexed 92 acres between Redland and Holcomb. There are some large trees back in there. It's not really accessible, but it'd be a shame to lose those trees during development.
I assume this is still in the code. I was going to look at Pete Walter, but he's not. He's the Natural Resource Committee guy. So the mitigation has to occur in terms of development. And that mitigation is that if you're removing a tree within the building envelope, you have to pay in some money to actually pay for a tree. If it's outside the outside the building envelope, and a tree has been cut down, you have to mitigate with 3 trees. But there's nothing preventing them from cutting down trees in the process, but there is a mitigation program. Now, I think a lot of you might be aware that the city is now looking at a code intended to create affordable housing, and this includes such things as ancillary dwelling units being built on an existing lot, things in terms of multiple dwelling units, changing the code there with a hope. And some of this is being done to reduce the cost of things like systems development charges, which are a sizable cost to a development. But in the process, and I asked this question was going forward, and I wasn't happy with the answer. But those those kinds of housing, especially ones that are building on currently existing lots, there will be no mitigation. The purpose of them doing this is to reduce the cost of development, and part of that is actually reducing the cost that would normally go to the city for SDCs and also some of these other codes that exist as well.
Any further questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
All right, moving on, item 6 on the agenda, general business. Item 6A, Pratt goals update.
So you should each have a copy of the draft version of Pratt goals as discussed at the last meeting. I watched the previous meeting probably 3 or 4 times to make sure that I tried to get all the information together that you discussed. What is presented in draft form is my understanding of that conversation. If at this point, if you have any questions or revisions or comments, we can have that conversation now, as well as if everyone seems to be in agreement, we can vote to adopt these as our goals for this biennium.
Could I make a recommendation? I don't know if the new members have all had a chance to look at those goals. Could we postpone this decision to the next meeting so the new members could actually look at them?
Yeah, it's totally to your decision.
Do we need a motion on that?
I'll move to postpone the decision on this to our next meeting. And give the new members a chance to look at the goals.
Are we still gonna have some comments?
We could
some-
certainly do it.
Usually you go motion second if there's one, and then have the
Then we can have discussion.
discussion.
Second.
Second, okay. All in favor?
Oh, no.
So we have,
No, not yet.
yeah,
Discussion.
so we have a motion and a
Sorry,
And I
second.
poked my button.
You did, you did,
I did once before.
Go back out and push your
you
button.
did. Ms. Karen Mori.
Okay, yeah, I watched the last meeting 3 times, and I'm really impressed Phil came up with this, so. I am going to say that as these stand, I think they are greatly improved. I will not vote for them because of item 6. I believe in city departments working together for the best of the city and the best interest of the taxpayers. I do not believe we should be encouraging the commission to adopt the upper yard without any input from any other city department. We do not know what plans the city might have for that property. We don't know what needs Public Works might have for that property. And with that in here, I cannot support this document.
I will make a comment. Excuse me, never mind. I was specific to that. Let me do this stuff.
Mr. Cook, I'm so formal tonight.
That was one of my items also I wanted to bring up for discussion. That it was a very contentious conversation when we had it before, and to me it felt like the vote that we took that night, which I voted against, to recommend this to the city council was essentially ramrodded through. I don't agree with that decision. I do agree with Karen that there's more footwork that needs to happen there, especially on the site itself. Especially in light of the deferred maintenance budget or lack thereof that we have right now that's outstanding. I think it's the wrong time to bring something like that up and to bring in another piece of property in the, in my opinion, overserved neighborhood as it is, when other neighborhoods are underserved, and we have a $27 million deficit right now. So on that piece, that's how I feel anyway on number 6. I don't think it belongs in this. The other piece I think is missing is the overall parks plan. We've had several discussions on that over the last couple of years, that the master plan is out of date, probably needs revisions, revisiting. I think that should be one of our priorities as a group, to revisit that plan and bring it up to date. especially with all the new development coming our way and within the recent past.
And that item, is listed as number 5 currently, so the initiate Parks and Recreation System Master Plan, is that what?
Yeah, I think it just needs to be more specific of what the goal is.
Oh, okay.
And what are we doing with that? It seems like we've looked at it and it's like everybody agrees, yes, we have a master plan, but it's been sitting there stagnant for a decade or more, and it needs to be updated.
Do we know what the year is? What year it was?
1999 was the original. We had an update in 2008, which was kind of a strategic plan more so than a redo of the master plan. We are definitely within the window of needing to revise that. In the budgetary process for this next biennium, I have requested funds to initiate the system master plan. So it's our internal staff goal as well to conduct the system master plan over the next biennium.
Great.
Mr. Neely?
In terms, we're all talking about the same, we're talking about the same issue with regard to the upper yard. I think you need to leave it on the goals and perhaps set the goals for after and putting on the agenda, the ability to put forward a motion to essentially undo the motion that was made last year,
Right.
because we made that motion. And if in fact a motion is made to undo the motion from last year, then it goes off the goals. But I don't think you should remove it at this point, because this body has already made a motion and approved a motion that to have that occur. So I think you have to take a formal action.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment since probably, I'm not sure what ramrodded or maybe discussed that really to quite extensively. And we did put forth a motion that passed, I think it was 5-4. And I agree with Doug that if we're going to move back to visit that again, that we have that same kind of discussion and redo a motion that we've already sent forward. And so I didn't get that feeling that we had charged. Oh, the other comment about overserved area, that park borders 3 neighborhoods. And it's probably more of a community park than it is a neighborhood park. We get a lot of people who use that park. So it isn't, but it was one neighborhood that took the initiative to try to save that part of that park, delaying or forestalling the development of Public Works into that upper yard, and that's how that came about. Unfortunately, Public Works found a better facility after 2 years and decided they would move there instead. So that's why this area is still up for discussion. And I think that's something we could have at another meeting, perhaps next meeting as an agenda item.
Mm-hmm. Okay, should we add that as a future agenda item for further discussion?
We can,
I'm gonna do a follow-up if I can. I'm still on this list anyway. But sorry about that. We went through a process. The point is, this was simply a recommendation to the city commission. But we don't know what the city commission's decision is going to be made. But the point I would make, we are a Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, and while we oftentimes send our advice through our director here, we're an advisory committee to the city commission. Now, if you want to do away with that motion, then we do away with that motion, but the point is, we don't necessarily wait for the city commission to direct us to do something. That might come to be, but we have every right as an advisory board to make recommendations to the city commission.
All right, thank you. Mr. Kugel?
I just had one question. When was that added or decided upon?
The recommendation.
Yes.
Has it been 6 months?
I would say September-ish. Yeah, September.
Okay, I was just wondering, you know, here we are sitting and we make the advisory and then we have a large turnover. We have 4 new three new members. You know, if this goes on for a year or more, I mean, 6 months, pretty quick, but, you know, if it had been a lengthy amount of time, would that be revisited because of the change in, you know, personnel? or-
Can be revisited. Yeah, sure.
What I'm getting out of this, should we add it as a future agenda item?
Yep.
Further discussion?
Yeah, I can add it to next month. The previous meeting, I presented kind of an overview and showed the property lines, as the upper waterboard park, or upper yard, lower waterboard park, in relation to the lower yard public works facility and the main waterboard park piece. Is there any other information specific to the park or the history or the public works facility that you would be requesting?
Could you give a link to the original meeting where that vote took place? So that people could hear the discussion at that time?
Yeah, I can send
I
that out.
think there may have been a meeting before that where this was discussed too, so if you could
I'm
check to let us know
Yeah.
which meetings those were.
pretty certain it was September. If I'm recalling correctly. Any further discussion before we vote on postponing the goals until another month? Any further questions regarding the goals? Okay. All right, we've had a motion, a seconded, all in favor of postponing the,
Oh, actually,
Phil
you have
could
to
do
do
that.
you have to do the
I have to
roll.
do a voice vote, sorry.
That's okay.
Daniels,
Aye.
Kugel,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Maury,
Aye.
Novak,
Aye.
Neely,
Yeah, aye.
Hammett,
Aye.
Sergeant,
Aye.
and the motion carries.
Okay. All right. Item 6B on the agenda, the Buena Vista House, Buena Vista House.
And I'm settling for Buna.
Buna.
I hate to admit it.
Buena.
I don't do it on purpose, but I always say Buena Vista. I can't get it out of my head. So this is just, again, kind of a carryover, rolling update. The City Commission received a presentation at the March 12th work session to discuss the Buena Vista House. Again, for any of those members that have not been to the house or seen the inside of the facility, I'd be more than happy to schedule a meeting to walk you through and talk a little bit more in detail. At this point, we are attempting to schedule a meeting with the stakeholder group to discuss next steps and setting kind of a benchmarking of if the power were connected back to the facility, what would those next steps be? Putting together kind of a strategic plan of how to approach the development of the house and trying to get to the point where they want to be, which is to reopen it as a public meeting space. Tentatively, we have on the April 17th City Commission meeting scheduled a presentation to discuss the Buena Vista House and reconnecting the power and hooking up heat to the facility. But again, we're trying to get back to the commission information as it relates to benchmarking and goals for that facility. So at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions. That's just kind of a general update.
Ms. Maury?
I was just gonna add something that's becoming more and more interesting. I'm working with the Friends Group, and in researching, we have now, I would say 99.9% are positive that the house that was moved to create the Buena Vista House, that has a long story to it now, we're sitting in the backyard. It was literally from just outside this wall out to Center Street. Went through some deeds and stuff and were able to come up with, yeah, there's enough points pointing to this that we're in the backyard.
In one house, not two.
One house, not two. And the humor is I've reconnected with an old friend whose parents grew up in the neighborhood, and we were talking about the house in the neighborhood, and I realized that he instinctively says Buna. And it's like, okay, about time to quit being stubborn, I guess. According to the people in the former Kansas City, it's Buena Vista.
I will state that I will call it Buena Vista, and if you choose a Spanish name, they might as well be
It's a tongue twister. Mr. Kugel?
I just had a statement and a question. After attending the commissioners' meeting, I definitely could say I side on the side of history over money. As far as, that's, I think that's what it's coming down to as far as these historical houses. One question that we did have after the last meeting, maybe in the commissioners' meeting or the last meeting, I heard the statement that we really didn't even know why it was red flagged. Have we figured that out? Because it's really hard to figure out how much, because then it came up to the cost, which obviously the city commission was going on about, and we have this discrepancy between a certain amount to a large amount, yet we don't have anything in front of us saying why it was.
Yeah, the previous building official red tagged it. The current building official could not find any notes specifying the exact reason. I'm assuming it's something to do with the structure. Again, it doesn't sit on a foundation, and having 50-ish people, it's actually by fire code up to 65 people are allowed in the building. I can't imagine putting that many people in that space. The current building official said that he was comfortable with small grouping, basically a handful of folks walking through the house at a time. And so trying to get it up structurally to a position where we could have that much load on the structure is where we want to be. The issue is once it has been red tagged and it's not occupied, if we were to start making improvements to the structure, we would need to bring it up to current code with everything having to relate to ADA, restroom facilities, the site grading, anything that would be required for a public meeting space would have to be made before we reopen it. And so there's some requirements there. On the flip side, and so that's kind of the stakeholder scope of work is kind of the minimum standard that would be required based on the building official's recommendation. The city staff looking at the structure is if we're going to make improvements to the house, we probably should make full improvements in order to maintain it as a property that we would like to maintain in perpetuity. And so with that, trying to put in a full foundation for the house instead of putting in corner foundations, which is the minimum standard that the architect that worked on the project was requesting. Again, if we're going to make improvements, we need to have the appropriate pathway. Wasn't in the recommendation or the scope of work for the stakeholder group, but trying to find appropriate parking, dedicated ADA parking, and trying to figure out a parking plan for the site as well. Those are some things to think about before opening it up to the general public. I will say that when we had the stakeholder meeting, as far as street parking, the stakeholders were pretty forward and saying they didn't mind having additional street parking in the neighborhood, that the impact was minimal, and they didn't care that it didn't have an appropriate number of spots for up to 65 people in the house. So that's something to take into consideration as well.
Any further questions? Okay. Item 6C, Newell Creek.
So this is, again, just kind of an update. We did discuss this at the last meeting. Since then, we had the Metro open house that was scheduled. And I did have a conversation with their conservation director and scheduled a meeting for later next month, so April 10th. I have a scheduled meeting with Metro staff to discuss some of the things that came up during our last meeting as far as mitigation or items of consideration for use of the 14-acre property at Newell Creek that is currently city-owned. So for those that weren't with us at the last meeting, we have a roughly 14 and a half acres worth of property that was master planned as part of the Newell Creek Canyon development. There's a request from Metro to transfer over that property to Metro to use as part of that development. And so I did have a brief conversation with Metro staff in regards to, the proposition, some of the concerns and questions and requests that came up within PRAC, and they're open to starting a dialogue and trying to figure out what would be a workable solution for Metro, as well as something that would be supported by PRAC as well as the City Commission. So I'm hopeful to have a little bit more of an update at the next meeting. But again, if you have questions or concerns or recommendations, feel free to send them my way. Again, we can't have meetings outside of our public meetings, so don't send them to the group as a whole to initiate conversation, but please do feel free to send them directly to me if you have ideas that you think should be brought up in that conversation.
The discussion last time was some people indicating that they would want to make certain that the day use area occurs early on in the development. I wanted to mention the phase 1 development, we really can't put any restrictions on that because they're going to be doing that this year. In fact, intend to complete phase 1 of this year. So any kinds of if we do make a recommendation that we would want to see the day use area developed early on, it really could do it before the first part of phase 2. Phase 2.
Yeah, and I will say in a brief conversation with Metro staff, and they didn't want to be put on the record, although we're having it in a public meeting and I'm telling you this. They said that if the bond were to pass, that they would see that as a possibility of funding some of those phase 2 projects that they have at not only Newell Creek, but at some of their other sites around the region. So there's a pretty big chunk of the bond that would be dedicated for development of Metro-owned properties. And so it's quite possible that that development, if the November bond does pass, that would be a funded project in the very near future. So.
If I may?
Please.
We've seen the development plans for that area. We've got new members. It might be nice to invite in terms of the phase 2 development and the vision for the phase 1 development and the vision for phase 2. Perhaps invite Metro staff to come in again.
Oh, yeah.
Talk to us.
Yeah, I can reach out.
Anything else? All right, moving on to item 6D, Willamette Falls Legacy Project.
So again, just a brief update on Willamette Falls. This is a standing project update. We have begun the process of working with a design team. We're very close to making a public announcement. There is, and I forgot to write that down, there is a scheduled partners update this coming month of April. And I will forward that out to the group. My apologies for not having that in front of me. But we're in the process of getting on the general contractor, construction manager for the project, the design team. We are very close to making a public announcement on the design team, and we're still set for a construction groundbreaking of April 2020. So we're about a year out. All things look fairly positive to continue to build on where we're at, and a lot of good news, a lot of synergy that are working towards us being able to get the project moving very, very soon. So I'll answer any questions if you have them.
I had a question. We have a new owner of the land that's not part of the public discussion of use. Is the same original owner still involved, and is there still discussions to get another owner to take his place?
Mr. Heidergurken is the current owner. He has been in conversations with a prospective new owner. It's a private matter between two private parties, but they're in a due diligence period and have extended that due diligence period. So it's a complicated site. I would imagine that, you know, it could be next week, it could be next year, before something actually triggers and happens that would be public information.
But the Riverwalk, the public side of it is set to go in April of 2020.
Correct, yeah, so the Riverwalk itself is not dependent upon the owner. We do have easement rights over the frontage of the property, which includes the entirety of the Riverwalk, and very strong easement language that allows us to construct the project.
Any further questions? All right. Moving on to item 6E, craft bylaws. I'll start, if I may. I had a couple things that just caught my eye. And that was on page 2, item 4, organization. Item 1, the word shall. Do we need to, it's somewhat ambiguous. We may or may not. It implies may or may not. Do we need to change that? And if not, I'm okay with it, but it caught my eye.
For number 1, item
Yes.
number 1?
Yeah, the word shall. There shall be 9 members at large.
I think it's kind of standard language that's used in a lot of the other bylaws. That's something that was on the previous version, and so we continued it here. We did list, as an example, on the next one, item 2, there may be one non-voting member, as it was brought forward as a recommendation to have a youth-centric voice on the committee possibly.
Okay, so our position is it could go either way. Ms. Moore?
If you look at the rest of the document, the tendency is to use will, not shall. And writing bylaws for way too many years, I would agree that will would be more appropriate in there. And also, when I see changes to bylaws like this, I really like to get red line copies. I'm guessing at what's changing.
The last version was a red line copy. I made the suggested edits from the last one, which is this document. I can send out the red line version if.
Well, is there a summary? What I can see here is that we dropped the senior center rep. I'm still going to torch you with information. And added the youth member. Is there any other significant change to these?
There's some minor changes as it related to the youth member and the members at large. So as an example, in the meeting, the meetings version. So a quorum shall exist when half plus one of the appointed voting members is present. So voting was added to show that having the non-voting youth member present did not count towards a quorum, since they would not be actually voting on any of the items on the agenda. So there was just some clarification language as it relates to now having non-voting members versus voting members of the group. The other item that was changed was the meeting time. Previous had said no later than 9:30 p.m. We did change that till 10 p.m. based on the city commission adopting a resolution for all committees that 10 p.m. would be the ending time.
Okay. And then that same page, item 5. Voting will be by voice vote. Do we need to specify by roll or something else? Because some of the votes require individual votes, right? roll?
My interpretation of that is that we are just verbally stating our vote as opposed to, in writing or, electronic method.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
I had some question on, under member eligibility, item 5. In number 1, actually number 4, no committee member shall serve more than 2 consecutive terms. That's clear in what it says. How long must they be out of PrAC before they can reapply or reserve as a unexpired term or another vacancy? And see where that's addressed, how long they have to be out.
Yeah, I would take that as meaning that they can, reapply after after they've been gone for a 1-year period.
For 1 year is what you
Is-
want to put that, should we put that in there? Is that something that maybe should be in there?
Yeah, let's
they have-
clarify that.
They have 2
Yeah.
terms that they can serve, then they, fall off of the committee and then they can reapply at the next period, which is typically the 1-year period.
Because there are resignations that happen before that 1 year term is up. And it may be somebody who's interested in reserving again after 6 months or 4 months or whatever. I'd just like to maybe have a discussion on that.
Let's see. So, no committee member shall serve more than 2 consecutive terms. A committee member may be eligible after a 1-year absence, something to that effect.
I don't really have I mean, that's basically what we're trying to discuss here is what we think is appropriate for that kind of language, but we should certainly have something in there to make it clear. Number 7 also, if you look at number 7, which kind of goes back to the same question we have where the newly appointed member shall assume the remainder of the existing term. Does that mean that they have 2 more terms they're eligible to serve? Or do they, if they're only coming in with 3 months to go in an existing term, then they only get another 2 and, okay.
Yeah,
That's
so they
clear
would
then
serve
in everybody's mind.
the remainder of that term. They would have 1 more term.
Okay,
And then after that, those 2 terms, even though one was a
and they
partial
gotta sit
term.
out for X number of months. So
Yep.
that's maybe what I'd like to see us come to a conclusion, what makes,
To clarify that, yeah, I could see a scenario where someone,
like a Sean Dackler who might wanna,
yeah, I could see various scenarios where we would want someone back. Yeah, okay. Mr. Neely?
After 2 consecutive, this is 8, after 2 consecutive unexcused absences, the chair shall contact the committee member. The remainder of the committee shall then determine continued membership. This is fine, but I also think there should be a total of missed ones in a year's time. I mean, you can't come on 2, off 1, 2, show up, off 2. So I would like to see a limit in terms of the number of absences within a year, unexcused absences within a year, as well as this.
the excused absence would be a different altogether.
Yeah,
If
this is,
they're not
this
telling
is,
anybody they're
these
not-
are unexcused absences, right?
Of which I should, I'd be remiss I should have mentioned this earlier today. Troy is not able to be here and did let us know ahead of time that he was not feeling well and would not be here tonight. So after 2 consecutive unexcused absences, the chair will, is there a number that you were thinking of?
4?
What do you think, Chris? You must have
Yeah, what's
what do you think
quarter?
it's a fair number?
I think that's fine.
You saying
It's
4,
arbitrary. It's,
Yeah.
4 unexcused absences?
It's consecutive, the wording is consecutive, 2 in
It's
a row.
unexcused.
I think 2, I mean, for me, 2 is fine. I mean,
Well, this is, yeah, these are consecutive, doesn't say anything about
Oh,
anything else.
overall.
That's my point. No, the 2 is fine.
Yeah.
Those are 2 consecutives, but if a person has missed unexcused a third of the meetings unexcused for a year, 4, I should say 4, that's what I suggest.
4 works for me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We've got, what is it, 9 times do we have 9 regular meetings.
Well, you have to have at least 9.
10, I think.
Oh,
is
you said 9.
what we typically have. I think 9 is a minimum is listed on the,
Okay.
yeah.
So, 4 out of 9 in a given year.
And those are unexcused
Unexcused,
absences,
yes.
and I will say I've only had a handful of members during my couple of years here where folks have had unexcused absences, period. So typically it's folks notify me of, I'm gonna miss the next meeting, and I'm gonna miss the next meeting. They may say, and I'm gonna miss the next meeting. So those are all
They're excused.
excused absences.
Yeah.
So we are really talking about, I don't know if it's, and again, they're your bylaws, but it may not be worth it, and calling that out specifically with a number of unexcused absences would be a very,
Yeah, well, this seems generous.
I would have to say though that if someone's gonna take the time to get here and then just not show up, probably, I think if you just sit and go, what are you doing? I mean, it's gonna work itself out. I mean, I understand your bylaws and all, but
Well, I think even with the excused absences, something that's out 4 or 6 times within the year, I think it warrants a conversation between them and the chair to say, is this something you can commit to or continue to commit to? Luckily, we have a full body, over the last couple of years, and it's not as impactful, but it could be.
Any other comments, questions regarding the bylaws?
So did we get a clear answer on how long you may sit out?
yeah,
Or
so I
you can
guess,
reapply.
we've had some recommendations from individuals of this group. Again, this is a group decision on what you would like to move forward, so I didn't hear any opposition to things that were suggested, but if you have any questions or concerns, or is everyone generally in agreement with the items that were brought up tonight?
Yeah.
I think the one thing that was left fuzzy for me was the wording around, if your term, you've served your 2 consecutive terms, the period between reapplying,
Yeah,
I think we need to nail that down, you have to wait at least 12 months or 1 year from the time your last term ends before you can reapply.
or before you can begin
You
serving
can
a new
serve,
term.
yeah,
But
exactly.
I did bring up that opportunity where it's an unexpired term that you're willing to serve in, where somebody has resigned or for whatever reason, and we're looking for a vacancy. Is that person who just, for example, quit 3 months ago, is he eligible to submit paperwork? You're thinking not, how you're leaning?
I'm thinking no. I think we have a large enough community, and we struggled with that this last go around, but we ended up with some really good candidates and new members. So I think even if it takes a little bit more time, I think it's beneficial in terms of gaining more diversity and new eyes and ears.
Something else I suppose you could consider is that, especially with regard to number 7, if you get somebody that's resigned and then somebody who is perhaps had served 2 consecutive terms, but maybe that was just a couple of months ago or something, perhaps there could be some language that says at the discretion of the committee that you could vote him in sooner to fill an unexpired term. At least that way there'd be some corporate memory to that individual coming back on board to fill the unexpired term if that is.
we've actually done that.
Yeah, and again, kind of going back to my previous comments, we had that conversation quite a bit, and it did go round and round, and I think, in my opinion anyway, what's most beneficial for this group and for the city is to get a new perspective and new folks in, even if it takes a little bit longer time to fill that seat. And by all means, if that person wants to serve again, then 12 months really isn't that long to wait to reapply.
Ms. Maury?
Other committees in the city, the 12 months is standard. So I'm uncomfortable with that, and I do agree. sometimes you need a new voice, and I've been on and off other committees with lapses. So I agree with the 12 months with no exceptions.
So what I'm hearing is that we should revise these, make the changes and comments, and look at them again next month? Is
Yeah.
that what I'm understanding?
I can craft a motion. Do we want to vote on it?
As a final draft with her comments?
You can make the changes in the motion.
My preference would be to wait.
Okay.
See the
Okay.
final
Okay.
version.
So I'll make the revisions, send them out to the group. I will try to send them out, earlier this time than the week before, or the weekend before, as it were. But if you have any, comments, questions, alterations, feel free to send them back to me via email, and I'll try to incorporate, again, those, comments at least as we come back to have that conversation.
Okay, very good. If there's nothing else, moving on to item 6F, Clackamas Park Master Plan.
So this is a general update. As you're aware, we had a presentation at the City Commission work session scheduled for March 12th. Presented the Clackamas Park Master Plan, the items of importance to that plan, including the RV park, the boat ramp, and the overflow parking lot across the street of Clackamas Drive. Commission gave direction to staff to reach out to the Oregon State Marine Board and begin conversations around what would be acceptable by the Marine Board to make alterations to the ramp design in order to limit the impact on the green space at Clackamas Park. Additionally, they want us to go back and look at the deed language as it relates to the overflow parking lot. It currently states there's a deed restriction that the lots across the street are to be used for park or sewer purposes. We currently use it for overflow parking for events, as well as during the busy boating season for fishing. So staff are in the process of kind of going through those steps. We've also had some brief conversations around how to show what options might be available in a visual standpoint, so that it can kind of give an idea of what would be possible in the space. Because so much of it is, when we make alterations to the boat ramp and what's currently there, you kind of see it in relation to what is currently there as opposed to what could be in other spaces. So if you're moving boat ramp and information and facilities over into what is currently green space, are there ways to incorporate additional green space within the other aspects of the design in order to limit the overall impact that might happen at the park? So we're in that process. We'll be coming back to this group very soon with kind of some basic information, and then going back to the City Commission at some point with an update on, again, what is feasible. With, a work session, you don't get the same type of direct voice from the commission as far as what they want you to do. And so there was no vote, no resolution. We are, again, going to be coming back at some point in the near future to talk about what type of engagement process they really would like to see, because for us as staff, having a master plan for a park and showing a community engagement process is extremely helpful in going after grants and in our planning processes. So having some type of community engagement, whether it's a full-on, master plan engagement, or, a little bit more of a light touch. But it is a very important piece of our park system, and we want to make sure that we're doing it right.
Just a quick comment on that for anybody that did not, or was not here or didn't see the commission conversation on this subject. I encourage you to do so, because it was very direct, in some cases less than PC, and I actually appreciated it. they took a very assertive stance on some of the options that were proposed.
Are you talking about a couple weeks ago?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
I actually appreciated it, so.
yeah, I watched it from home. And just for our new members, is everyone aware that you can review old, previous meetings on the Oregon City ORC.org? Okay.
I have a comment about, directed maybe to Phil, but to all of us. I see a lot of value in taking at least one tour in this group as a work session, a prac work session at that park together. So we're looking at the same things that are being talked about, formulating things. I know a lot of us don't have the time to go in there on their own, but nevertheless, as a group, we can see that. And know what Phil is suggesting, that the staff has suggested from, and I went over to the other park. I call it the other park on the other side of the mouth of the river in Gladstone. I don't know how many of you have a chance to do that. And they have a boat ramp over there as well, but that park is multi-use, community gardens, et cetera, and it might even, I don't know if we'd want to incorporate it on the same tour or just a quick through there, but it can give us some ideas about how, what that park is supplying that maybe we don't need to supply, that we can use our space in a different way to help the entire community.
Is that something you could arrange, Phil?
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
that's a great idea.
Is that
Yeah.
something that we'd like to do on a off week of our regular meetings or a work session leading up to a regular meeting?
Maybe a poll?
Okay, I can send something out.
Okay, thank you.
Having the overlays that were presented at city commission ahead of that would be useful.
Okay, yeah, I can send that as well.
Can I ask a question? I don't want to step on Doug or Karen.
Oh, you're on
The,
the wrong
oh,
agenda item.
I think we
Change
just have
agenda
to
items.
move.
Oh, right.
But thank you for using the button.
Good intentions.
Got our attention now, though.
Yeah, well, I was thinking you guys are just out of order, but I won't say anything. Yeah. Where was I? After seeing the commission, being at the commissioners meeting, I realized my ignorance on what are we doing there? I mean, why are we moving the boat ramp? What is the plan there? I mean, I don't want to waste our time. Maybe I can find this info somewhere else. But is there a four-minute synopsis that for us that possibly don't know? It seems like the state did the plans. Am I correct on that? Are they paying for it? Does that make sense? What I'm
Yeah.
asking for us.
Would you like me to
Be my guest.
expand on that? Okay.
Yes.
And don't take too long. I don't want to, waste folks' time.
Yeah, so the river is shifting. Sandbar started to form in the middle of the Clackamas River. Additionally, we're seeing damage to the current ramp in its current location. It got to a point where the ramp was unusable. The city worked with the Oregon State Marine Board, received a grant, did improvements for a short-term fix in its current location, and knowing that a new location would probably be required in order to not see similar damage in the near future, basically eroding away underneath the ramp in a way that we knew would continue to happen. They did some studies, so the Oregon State Marine Board funded a grant to do a hydrology study. The study looked at, of course, the river flow and the current position, and tried to identify a location that would be ideally suited for, a future, for a position that would see less loss possibility in the future. Rivers change, natural occurrences happen, but their consensus was that moving it 350 feet downriver, plus or minus, made the most sense in the river. With that, the Oregon State Marine Board supported those findings. The engineer's report supported those findings. Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife supported those findings. They did provide public input and feedback afterwards, and held an open house. The public were able to go in and listen to the engineering's report and look at the study. They came up with alternatives A and B. Of that, the Marine Board asked for additional safety measures, which included a loop to allow for boaters to be able to loop around as opposed to doing a 3-point turn on the boat ramp, 150 feet downriver. So when you're looking at the designs that were put in place, that it was taken into consideration the hydrology study. I am, again, just relaying information as it's been provided by engineering reports. They are providing a recommendation based off of those same engineering reports. And so whether or not the city chooses to do with that piece of property, you know, it's the city's decision. Ultimately, it's the city commission's decision what they would like to see done with that property. I will say that we do receive funding from the Marine Board for site improvements. We also receive ongoing operation and maintenance funds from the Marine Board to provide the parking lot and restroom facilities at the site. If we do not have a ramp at that location, somewhere within the park that's an agreeable location, we would have to repay previous grants that were issued to the city. Additionally, we would not have some of the ongoing operation and maintenance funds that go to the parking and the restroom facilities at that site. So again, it's staff just providing this information. This group is an advisory group to the city commission. If you have ideas or suggestions as we move forward, I would love to be able to help get that information to the city commission, but it's the city commission's decision what to do with that piece of property. And however I can provide that information to the advisory group and to the commission, we can start walking through that process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Phil. Thank you. Mr. Neely?
This was brought to us, and one of the major concerns that we had was that they had a road access to their planned, to the design that they had proposed for the new one to come through, that really split the park. And then they had a big area for turnaround and so forth, so a lot of the green space and so forth was really being affected by the plan that they put forward, and that raised concerns on our part, I know.
And of course, another huge topic will be about RV parking and where that falls within the area that we're talking about and how important that is, priority for that. Generates a lot of income for the city, and probably with the Willamette Falls Legacy project, the parking issues that I attended as with Metro when they first hired a consultant for parking here in Oregon City to access the Willamette Falls Legacy project. It was on the group to figure out what best to get people to that mill site. And obviously not driving your car down Main Street is the best idea because there's going to be a lot of people using that area. So we're talking about other ideas, but certainly a free shuttle, possibly from end of the Oregon Trail as well as Clackamat Park. Those are areas that could be used to shuttle people year-round, really, to that site. So certainly RV parking is another concern.
It makes me think about us revisiting our master plan too. All the pieces of the puzzle fit in. Okay. Any further questions or comments? Okay. Item 6G, Claremont Way.
And I'm gonna turn on our fancy projector for us.
Get to try out your presentation.
So, wait for it to catch up. We have a piece of property that was presented to the city commission for consideration to enter into a purchase and sales agreement for acquisition for park purposes. I'd like to state that prior to that meeting, we invited the PRAC chair and vice chair to an executive session to discuss acquisition. And so this is something that, although this has not been discussed previously at a PRAC open meeting, that was discussed, including leadership from this group. The piece of property includes two different pieces, two different tax lots, even though it looks like three. So we have tax lot 300, which is split. It's a 1.97 acres total between the two different pieces. And then the property in the middle, 0.56 acres, property number 400. And again, I can't tell you why the lots were split. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but it is what it is. So it's two tax lots. Again, it's right around 2.5 acres. The primary purpose for acquiring these pieces of property is that this is along a trail corridor for a multi-use path, which would extend basically from Wesley Lynn Park up through Beaver Creek, connect very close to the new Newell Creek Canyon properties through Metro. This is along a corridor which would provide more direct access. One of the conversations, one of the comments that was received during the commission meeting was, or during conversations was like, how does this work in relations to, the street, sidewalks and bike paths, things like that. The proposed connectivity really does connect park to park to park, and allows access along a corridor which connects some of our residential areas, which are being built out pretty substantially, to some of our business uses. So connecting to the Safeway, the Fred Meyer properties, which are just across the street on Malala, the Malala corridor, which is right there adjacent to the property. One of the questions that came up in the conversation about acquiring this property was also opportunities for dog off-leash areas or dog parks, fenced dog parks. We've been in conversations with PGE around there's a transmission easement that runs through the property. And so we've had some conversations with PGE around what this property could be used for. If we were to develop it as a trail, and if we were to look at possibly putting dog park amenities on the site, which would include, 4-foot fencing, include parking, things like that, which would be required for a property like this. All conversations have been generally positive. We would have to enter into an agreement with PG, basically that they would have ultimate access to the transmission lines in order to provide service and repairs that might be needed in that corridor. We don't see that as being a problem or a roadblock. Taking down a section of fencing to allow equipment on site, allowing access. If you go up or down that corridor, you'll see stormwater swales that have fencing. You'll see parking lots, which are at the Fred Meyer side, even in the Wesley Lynn Park. The same corridor runs through that section, which includes the parking lot and trails adjacent to the shelter and baseball facilities. So again, a lot of positives. We're currently in our due diligence period. We're conducting a phase 1 environmental site assessment, and again, continuing those conversations with PG to figure out what we can use the property for. If our 30-day due diligence period goes smoothly, we're anticipating the second meeting in April, or possibly the first meeting in May, to move forward with approvals by the City Commission. No. Gladly answer questions or hear comments if you have them.
Hey, I think you mentioned, Who owns that, half acre parcel at the north end of those lots?
The city does.
Okay,
It's,
that's what I thought.
Streets Division currently.
And then, if I may, that, you've got an area where cars are parked, I presume that's private. It's right on Moala in the corner.
Just adjacent to Mall, yes, so there's a,
Joanne's Fabrics.
Joanne's.
yeah,
Yeah.
Fencing for a potential dog park.
Mhm.
How would the funds be derived for that expense?
yeah, that would be a new development. It, in theory, could be SDC eligible.
SDC.
As we move forward with our master plan, conversations, we would anticipate putting together a new capital list, new CIP list, and updating our methodology for system development charges. So probably being a little bit more specific. Our current list is a little generic in the types of properties that we can acquire and develop. I think this would fully be eligible within that. I mean, it's on our list for trails. So we have trails as the developable system development charge applicable piece. Additionally, if we're to use it as a park property for a community amenity such as a dog park, I would be eligible, I would imagine.
Okay, thank you.
You're probably looking at parking too, is incorporated into that.
Yeah, there is street parking all along the frontage, but I would imagine if we were to develop it as a fenced dog park, we would want to have off-street parking.
Any questions, comments? Okay, moving on to item 6H, other general business.
Nothing on my end.
Yeah,
Just go this way.
Stage lights came on.
yeah. Okay. Item 7, member reports. Starting on my right, Mr. Daniels.
I have none.
I was didn't know I was required to have a report.
Not
Next
required.
month.
Okay, have you visited any parks in the last month?
I did try to go to the neighborhood association meeting yesterday, in which all I found was a sign,
Oh, which neighborhood?
Caulfield,
Just a sign?
saying, sorry, no meeting. So but that's where I'm at on that right now.
Mr. Cook,
Nothing this month.
Ms. Moore.
Reminding everybody, stop by the senior center in April to see what 2 weeks of work does. I'm looking forward to it. And we now have one Civil War veteran headstone that's going to be placed at Mountain View Cemetery. A headstone for a 20-year-old orphan who served 2 years in the Marine Corps and has been dead 100 years in an unmarked grave. And we're now in the process of starting work on 5 more Civil War veteran headstones. Very much appreciating the Sons of Union veterans of the Civil War who have this process nailed, but also very much appreciate staff being willing to help projects like this, so there'll be a little less bare grass in the old cemetery. That's it.
Thank you. For myself, Oregon City Parks Foundation, very busy. We're looking at the next Ivy poll, burn calories, get your exercise, get your stress out. So that'll be announced through our website, and I'll mention the date once it's established. Also very busy in the Park Place. It was Park Place Park. Got some beautiful trees, and this is just a vision right now, nothing, hasn't materialized, but possibly removing some of those hawthorn trees through Oregon City Parks Foundation. And of course, we'll work with you in that regard. You know, having some sort of fun day out in the woods.
Okay.
So, all right, that's it for me, Mr. Neely.
The opportunity, as well as others, to make another trip to the Willamette Falls, and every time I go there, I learn more things, and they seem to be getting more and more in terms of the identification of the large public use area that's going to be developed there. And so I'm looking very, very forward to that. I'm going to phrase this very carefully because I don't know if it's public knowledge or not, but the planning, the county is thinking of actually selling their lot next to Abernathy Creek off of Abernathy Road there. And there strikes me that, first of all, we have a regional trails plan, and there might be some opportunities, depending on who the buyer is, to actually look at that particular area for potential public access and at least some of that. And you may not have heard of this, but I heard it from a county employee. And so,
From three
just
sources.
say that you've heard about it.
I've heard
too.
it from 3 different
Okay,
sources.
and so, I think it's something to keep our eyes open. I've got a question, what's happening on Arbor Day? I know there's an Arbor Day event, but are any of us involved, really?
Yes, so
Oh,
we
yeah,
have
there is.
Oregon City Enhancement Day, which is scheduled for next Saturday
Yes,
at the end of the Oregon Trail.
yes, but you
Um,
can just show up and register there,
You can
right?
show up and register at 8:30. You can pre-register online, and then sleep in until 9 o'clock. If you pre-register, they have t-shirts ordered for volunteers. You'll be more likely to be able to secure a t-shirt, which everyone likes their swag. But we're very excited to have it at the end of the Oregon Trail property. As you're aware, we have a lot of use of that site. We'll be celebrating our city's 175th anniversary of incorporation this year in August at the end of the Oregon Trail property. And so there'll be a lot of community events. It'll be nice to get out there and plant and beautify that very important property.
I want to, not quite done, in the years past, the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council has had its site that it works on, and that's the Abernathy Creek Park. We're bringing some professionals to do some invasive management, so we're not going in there this year. But on April 20th, we've gotten the junior ROTC to come to Ogden Middle School. We had a small grant to do some native plantings on part of their property there, and we're using this opportunity to get them in there to clear away some rubbish and to actually do some work around some of the plantings that we've had. So that's what the Natural Resource Committee is going to be doing, but it won't be doing it on Arbor Day. It'll be doing it on the 20th of August. Of April, excuse me.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder about Enhancement Day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Forgot to mention that. Ms. Hammock?
Nothing to report.
Okay. Mr. Sargent?
Well, for the record for the committee, I've been appointed to Clackamas County Aging Services Council.
Those aren't services they're trying to get rid of, are they?
Well, I went to the meeting last month, and one of our biggest debates was, do we want to be called senior citizens, elders, or I forget what the other one was. But anyway, there's a survey going around as to what we want to be called.
Honored citizens.
Honored citizens. Yeah.
Honored
There we
citizens.
The
Honored
wise
citizens.
ones. Okay. Moving on to item 8, staff reports.
So the recreation report you received via email from Denise. Filbert Run Park grant, just an update. We are planning on submitting the local government grant program grant tomorrow. Deadline is April 1st. We are anticipating hearing back from them within a month or so, and a presentation scheduled for middle part of June. After the presentation, then the group convenes and reaches back out to those that have been selected to move forward for recommendation. The local government grant committee provides the recommendation to the state parks committee, which then makes that determination in September. So we won't know for sure until September, but we're hopeful that we'll have positive news the next 30 days, and then hopefully really good news within the next 60 to 90 days. I do have a very short presentation, which for those that are this thing is so sensitive. There we go. So for those that are not aware of the property, just a quick overview. So Filbert Run is in the lower left-hand corner of that map. In the Westing, oh goodness, what's the official neighborhood association? Hazel Grove Westing Farm Neighborhood Association. The property is approximately 3.5 acres in size. It's currently an undeveloped park. It is an open green space consisting of a vegetated corridor. It's I always get this wrong, Epherian stream, so it's not always present, but in heavy rain events and during the winter time, it does have water running through the site. There is some existing tree canopy in the central corridor of the park, and open lawn area just there to the right-hand side of the vegetative corridor. Here's some existing conditions. You can kind of see we do have a cement sidewalk, which is on the northern side of the park. On the southern side of the park, there's an existing entrance, but it is undeveloped, basically just lawn area. The mature tree canopy in the central part of the park is really I think the selling feature of the entire space. So the master plan concept calls for a loop running through the park, access to the neighborhood just to the east of the park through a walking path. We'll have a formal entry to the south, which include a park entry and kiosk. There'll be nature play amenities for children, a shelter, and just overall cleaning up and connecting of the space. It will make it, again, ADA accessible, so users of all abilities will have the opportunity to enjoy the park where its current condition does not allow that. Some of the pieces that are called out, again, eco lawn on the western edge of the park, footbridges across the stream corridor, shelter, interpretive signage, native plantings, additional present images that were used for the design process, the public engagement process, including the natural play elements, which is really an exciting piece. So if we are successful, again, moving forward, we would look at a winter 2020 RFP process, doing construction documents and permitting to then allow us to have the park completion in the summer to fall of 2021. So again, we'll be presenting to the State Parks Committee hopefully in June, and we hopefully at our July meeting will be able to provide information to this group as far as if we've been accepted or not.
Great. Any questions or comments? I'll make one. I like the trees. In a way, it reminds me of Atkinson. Yeah, it's nice to keep the trees.
There you go. And then last item is just the Beaver Creek concept plan. There is an open house scheduled for April 9th. 7 o'clock at the Oregon City High School Library. This will be looking at the concept plan area, zoning. In that space, there are some trail corridors as well as green space, which have been planned, not as heavily planned with park space as some of our other concept plan areas, but a lot of interconnectivity and natural areas that will be preserved for future use. So if you are interested, I would highly recommend attending the April 9th meeting and learning more about the project and what the different pieces of that will include.
All right, future agenda items. I think we had chatted about a couple of things.
So the items I have currently that we discussed thus far include Waterboard Park, Mill Creek, having a presentation from Metro staff, tour of Clackamas Park as part of a work session. One item that that we didn't discuss yet, but that I'd like to bring up and probably will be presented at a future meeting is a presentation from ODOT or their representatives to discuss the I-205 widening project and impacts and mitigation. They're currently working on their 60% design set, and they're anticipating an August completion of that design set. So within the next couple of months, probably having further conversation around what their impact will look like for the parks, possible mitigation. And they had one presentation to us a few months back as they were going to the voting process for the easement use for the permanent and temporary use of the green spaces. And so in conversations with them more recently, they wanted to come back and kind of talk about those the mitigation and the types of things that they will be doing during the construction process, and well after the construction process, the pieces that would remain as a public benefit for our park system. So looking at probably within the next 2 months, scheduling them to come in and give a presentation.
Okay, and I could, so it's on the goals, but we left the last city work session over the deferred maintenance with the idea that we needed more public process, polling, listening sessions.
Yes.
When are we gonna start planning that?
Yeah, so we are right now working on a RFQ, a request for qualifications for a firm to kind of walk through the public engagement process. Additionally, we have begun looking at the stakeholder group and what that would look like. Probably reaching out, our goal was to have this month to do the public reach out to have folks apply to serve on that stakeholder engagement group. We had a previous meeting with this group talking about representation within that stakeholder group. At the time, it was before our voting of chair and vice chair. During that conversation, we had voted to have Troy and the chair of this group be the representatives. So I would probably be reaching out to again, Lisa and Troy as the voted members of this group, if you are still comfortable with that being the representation of PRAC within that wider stakeholder group.
And we can chat about that now or at a later meeting when it gets closer to that.
I don't think there's any change to that stance or that
Okay.
hope.
And that was part of my, and I'm glad you mentioned it, Karen, on the goals to reach out to the different neighborhoods, because if we are going to be doing that, reaching out to attending meetings on a regular basis, and I mean like once a quarter, and it doesn't have to be all of us, but it can be kind of rotating. It was part of it to kind of build a rapport with the neighborhoods. So I think especially in Park Place, that will be needed. Yeah. So.
And Caulfield.
Is that a troubled area?
It's always been a little conflicted.
I have one more
Caulfield just doesn't show up. I don't know about Park Place.
Yeah, no, it's, we have one park for over 5,000
Yeah.
residents.
And
We're
houses
un-
going up like
we're
mushrooms.
underserved. Yeah, we're underserved, so that's, yeah, asking for the public for,
There's no contention over there.
yeah, it's, the committee is fine, the neighborhood association is fine, it's just outreach to the community, to understand why we need more money. Enough said. Mr. Daniel?
I was gonna ask, Phil, if you would, not necessarily at the next meeting, but have another tutorial about SDCs. We have
Yes.
some new members
Oh,
here.
true.
And you did ask for that at a previous.
And how, the definition of it and the applications that are typically used and in development of parks, whether they're new or perhaps existing. Master plan, examples of the master planning, trails, lighting, that kind of, but I think it would be beneficial to hear that again and when we go forward, especially with the master planning that we'll be involved with and new parks coming on board.
Yeah, I can do that, definitely. That's something that, like, at the next meeting would be,
Yeah. that'd be
If you've
great.
got the
Never
time,
too
I
soon
think
for
that, if you don't have the time, you can put it off. but-
yeah, no, I'm sure I can put it together.
Yeah, and kind of piggyback on that, any updates you may have on, looking at the SDC fees as they are now. I know there was some talk about looking at updating those or
Yeah.
revisiting those.
Yeah, definitely.
Mr. Neely?
At some point or another, I would like us to have a map of the city that shows all city-owned lands. I'm asked on various occasions why some of the lands we own are parklands, and I think it'd be good to take a look at those maps and
Okay.
perhaps some kind of discussion about that.
Okay, yeah. And we begun going through a process of identifying all of the city-owned properties, and we had some that were not currently assigned to specific departments, but
Yeah.
I think we're in a better position to provide that information. to you.
And including urban renewal plans.
Okay, yeah.
Anything else? Our next meeting is Thursday, April 25th. And with that, meeting adjourned.